The streets of Paris were alive with the soft hum of the evening, the scent of fresh espresso from corner cafes, the distant chatter of lovers walking along the Seine, the golden glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. But Ethan Pierce wasn't paying attention to any of it. His mind was lost, lost in memories of Sophia, lost in thoughts of what could have been. Welcome to Shadow Crime. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue creating even better content. Thank you so much. All right, let's get started. Lost in the ache of knowing she was about to marry someone else. He walked without direction, his expensive shoes clicking against the cobblestone, his tailored coat doing little to shield him from the chill that wasn't just in the air, but inside him. Then he saw her, a woman unlike the rest. She sat in front of a small cafe, her posture straight, her gaze steady, not begging, not asking, just existing. A woman with tangled hair, worn-out clothes, and eyes that held a story too deep for words. She was out of place yet belonged here more than anyone. Ethan stopped. Something about her felt different. Maybe it was the way she didn't shrink from the world. Maybe it was the quiet dignity she carried despite everything. Before he could think, he sat down beside her. A conversation between strangers. Celeste turned her head, startled for a brief second before her lips curled into an amused smirk. "You must be lost," Ethan let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "Maybe I am." She raised an eyebrow, scanning him, the expensive coat, the designer watch, the air of a man who had never wanted for anything. "You don't belong here." "And you do?" he countered. Celeste's smirk faded slightly. "I used to." A pause. The weight of those words lingered in the air between them. Ethan studied her closer. She wasn't just another lost soul in Paris. "What happened?" he asked, genuinely curious. And for some reason, Celeste answered, "Life." 2 syllables, yet an entire tragedy. Ethan should have left then, but instead, something reckless, something impulsive, something completely insane slipped from his lips. A proposal unlike any other. "Come with me to a wedding." Celeste blinked, stunned. "Excuse me? I need a date. Someone to stand next to me. You don't even know me." "That's the point," she scoffed, shaking her head. "You must be insane." "Possibly." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. "I'll handle everything. Clothes, hotel, flight. All you have to do is be there." Celeste stared at him, searching for the trick, the hidden agenda. "Why me?" Ethan hesitated. "Because you don't look at me like I have everything. You look at me like you know I have nothing." Silence stretched between them. For the first time in a long time, Celeste felt curiosity stir in her chest. "Fine," she finally said, leaning back. "But just so you know, I don't do fairy tales." Ethan smirked. "Neither do I." The streets of Paris glowed under the soft afternoon sun as Ethan Pierce and Celeste Moreau walked toward an upscale boutique on Avenue Montaigne, a place where wealth wasn't just displayed, it was expected. For Celeste, stepping into this world felt surreal. A week ago, she had been another forgotten soul on the streets. Now, she was about to enter a boutique where a single dress cost more than what she once made in a year. But if she felt out of place, she didn't show it. She held her head high, her steps steady, even as the glass doors opened and the scent of expensive perfume and exclusivity filled the air. The weight of judgment. The moment Celeste stepped inside, a hush fell over the boutique. The sales associates, dressed in pristine designer outfits, exchanged glances. A woman in worn-out clothes, shoes that had seen better days. A presence that didn't belong. Celeste felt their stares. She always did. But she had long since learned not to shrink under the weight of judgment. She didn't fidget. She didn't lower her gaze. She didn't apologize for existing in a space where others thought she shouldn't be. Ethan noticed, and for the first time, he truly understood. This woman was different. She wasn't ashamed, she was defiant. "Bonjour, monsieur. Can I help you?" The saleswoman's voice was polite but distant, her smile too tight, too forced. She needs a dress," Ethan said simply, nodding towards Celeste. A pause, a flicker of hesitation. "For her?" "Yes, for her. The best one you have." The woman blinked, then forced another smile before gesturing stiffly toward the fitting rooms. "Right this way, mademoiselle." The transformation. Celeste stepped into the dressing room, her fingers grazing the fabric of the dresses hanging before her, silk, chiffon, velvet, textures she hadn't felt in years. She should have felt like an imposter. But instead, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: curiosity. After a few minutes, she stepped out. The boutique fell silent. She wore a deep sapphire blue evening gown, the fabric draping over her frame like it had been made just for her. Her once messy hair was now swept back, revealing the delicate angles of her face. But it wasn't just the dress. It was the way she carried herself. Gone was the woman in tattered clothes. Standing before them was Celeste Moreau, someone who had once known beauty, grace, and power. Ethan's gaze never left her. "What?" Celeste asked, shifting under his stare. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but sure. "It's you, Celeste. It's always been you." She turned to the mirror, studying the reflection staring back at her. For the first time in years, she saw not who she had been, but who she could still become. The towering chateau stood like a dream in the heart of the French countryside, its grand halls adorned with chandeliers, tables dressed in the finest linens, and the air thick with the scent of roses and champagne. It was a wedding straight out of a fairy tale, yet as Ethan Pierce stepped inside, the magic of the night meant nothing to him. Because this wasn't just any wedding. This was the wedding of Sophia Laurent, the woman who had once been his and was now about to belong to another man. But Ethan wasn't alone. At his side, dressed in a stunning sapphire blue gown, was Celeste Moreau. She wasn't royalty. She wasn't part of this world. But tonight, she owned it. A room in shock. As Ethan and Celeste entered, the room fell into silence. Hundreds of guests, yet not a single voice. Glasses froze midair, conversations halted. All eyes were on Celeste. The woman who had once lived in the shadows of Paris now stood under the golden glow of chandeliers, her presence so commanding that even the wealthiest elites of France had to stop and stare. It wasn't just her beauty. It was the confidence in her walk, the fire in her eyes, the way she stood next to Ethan like she had belonged there all along. And then from across the room, Sophia saw them. A tension-filled reunion. Sophia Laurent had spent months preparing for this day. The perfect dress, the perfect venue, the perfect groom. Yet in one instant, everything shifted. Ethan, here, with her. She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the delicate lace of her gown as she made her way toward him. "Ethan, I didn't think you'd come." His gaze held hers, calm, unreadable. "I didn't think so either." Silence stretched between them. Sophia's eyes flickered to Celeste. "And she is?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Celeste." He turned slightly, meeting Celeste's steady gaze. "My girlfriend." A calculated smile, a flicker of surprise in Sophia's eyes. Celeste, however, remained unaffected. She didn't flinch under Sophia's scrutiny. She didn't lower her gaze when the wedding guests whispered behind their champagne glasses. She simply stood her ground, shoulders back, chin high, completely unbothered. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan saw a new kind of power in the woman beside him. Celeste wasn't just playing a role. She was rewriting the story. The golden glow of chandeliers cast a soft shimmer across the grand hall, yet a different kind of fire burned in the air, unspoken tension. Sophia Laurent had been the star of the evening, but now, the presence of Ethan Pierce and Celeste Moreau had shifted everything. The whispers grew louder, guests exchanged glances. Who was the mysterious woman standing beside Ethan? And why did Sophia look so shaken? Trashar. A private confrontation. Sophia had to get him alone. With a graceful smile, one only the well-bred could master, she lightly touched Ethan's arm. A word? Ethan hesitated but nodded. He followed her through an archway leading to a quieter corner of the chateau, away from the curious eyes of high society. But Celeste watched them go, and she listened. A conversation between the past and present. Sophia exhaled sharply, turning to face Ethan. "Ethan, let's not do this." "Do what?" he asked, his voice calm. "Pretend." Sophia's eyes darkened. "We both know she doesn't belong here." Ethan's expression didn't waver. "And you do?" "Ethan, look at her." Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. She's not one of us. And that was when Ethan knew. Not only had he lost Sophia, but he no longer wanted her. There had been a time when he would have fought for her, convinced her that he could be what she needed. But now he saw her for who she truly was. Maybe Sophia. Ethan's voice was steady, clear. Maybe I don't belong in your world either. Celeste steps in. A slow, deliberate set of footsteps interrupted them. Celeste emerged from the shadows, her sapphire gown flowing behind her like liquid midnight, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, they were sharp, piercing straight through Sophia. It's funny, Celeste said, voice cool. You talk about me like I'm not standing right here. Sophia turned, startled, but quickly masked her reaction with a tight smile. Oh, but you did. Celeste tilted her head slightly. You think I don't belong here. Sophia faltered. Because Celeste wasn't angry. She wasn't flustered. She was unfazed. Let me make this clear, Celeste continued, stepping closer. Ethan chose me, and more importantly, she turned to Ethan. I chose him. Silence. For the first time that night, Sophia Laurent had nothing to say. And Ethan? He smiled because Celeste hadn't just held her ground. She had won. The Grand Chateau faded behind them as Ethan and Celeste stepped into the crisp French countryside night. The wedding was still alive inside, glasses clinking, laughter echoing, a celebration that was never meant for Ethan. And for the first time, he was okay with that. He had walked in thinking he needed closure, but instead he had found something far more unexpected. He had found Celeste. More than a game. The sleek black town car waited to take them back to their hotel, but neither of them made a move toward it. Instead, Ethan loosened his tie, exhaling as he glanced at Celeste, this woman who in just a matter of days had gone from a stranger on the streets to someone he couldn't stop thinking about. You know, Ethan mused, hands in his pockets, when I asked you to come with me, I thought it was just about Sophia. Celeste smirked. And now? Ethan turned fully to face her. Now, I'm not so sure. The night stretched between them, filled only with the distant hum of crickets and the occasional gust of wind. No more judgmental stares. No more expectations. Just the two of them. A night of honesty. Instead of heading back, they walked. Through the vineyards. Through the silent roads where the moonlight bathed the world in silver. And for the first time in years, Ethan talked about something other than business. He talked about his childhood, about the pressure of success, about how somewhere along the way he had built an empire but lost himself. And Celeste? She told him about the life she once had, how she lost everything. How surviving on the streets of Paris had taught her that dignity was the only thing people couldn't take, unless she let them. The hours melted away, and so did the walls between them, a moment of truth. As they stood by a quiet stone bridge, Celeste rested her hands on the cool railing, looking at the reflection of the stars in the water below. So tell me, she said, voice softer now, was I just an excuse to make your ex jealous? Ethan shook his head. No. Then what was I? He stepped closer. Celeste, you weren't just someone I brought to a wedding. I want to know who you really are. For the first time in a long time, Celeste felt something stir inside her. The feeling of being seen. Not for what she had lost, not for where she had come from, but for who she truly was. And this time she didn't look away, she smiled. Then I guess you'll have to stick around long enough to find out. The world that had once been Ethan Pierce's playground was now a battlefield. Not of business deals, not of power struggles, but of perception. He had built an empire, surrounded himself with people who worshipped status, wealth, and legacy, and now those same people were looking at him as if he had lost his mind. Because he was in love with a woman who didn't belong. A love that the world refused to accept. The whispers started quietly. At first, they were just passing remarks at private gatherings. Ethan Pierce? You mean the billionaire who's dating that woman? Can you believe it? A man like him, with someone like her? Then the whispers turned into full-blown gossip. She was homeless, you know? She must be using him for his money. He could have any woman in the world, and he chooses that. Ethan ignored them, or at least he tried to. Celeste, a woman who refused to be saved. Ethan, being Ethan, wanted to fix everything. He wanted to give Celeste a fresh start, a home, security, comfort. He wanted to erase every hardship she had ever faced. But Celeste, she didn't want to be saved. Ethan, I don't need you to rescue me. I know. Then why do I feel like I'm your project? Ethan, that wasn't what he had intended. But the more he tried to help her, the more Celeste felt like she was losing herself. Because the world wasn't just judging her, she was starting to judge herself. Was she really enough for a man like Ethan Pierce? Or was this just another temporary illusion, one that would disappear the moment he realized she didn't fit into his world? A family's disapproval. The worst came when Ethan's family intervened. His mother, a woman of impeccable social standing, sat across from him at a private club, her gaze sharp. Ethan, I raised you better than this. Better than what? Better than throwing away your reputation for a woman who, she hesitated, lowering her voice, who comes from nothing. Ethan's jaw clenched. She is not nothing. You're risking everything, your name, your company, your legacy. And if I don't care? His mother sighed, shaking her head. One day, you will. Celeste begins to question everything. The walls were closing in. She could handle the whispers. She could handle the stares. But Ethan's world was suffocating her. She wasn't one of them. She would never be. And slowly doubt began to creep in. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong, and if she didn't belong, how could their love survive? The city lights of Paris shimmered outside the penthouse windows, but inside a different kind of silence filled the air. Celeste stood by the door, her hands clenched at her sides, her heart pounding with a decision she had been fighting for days. Ethan, I can't stay. Ethan froze, his brows knitting together. What? I need to find myself again before I can love anyone else. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the weight of her words. Ethan took a step forward, searching her face for something, anything, that would tell him this wasn't real. Celeste, you don't have to go. We can figure this out together. But that was the problem. Celeste didn't want to be figured out. She didn't want to be Ethan Pierce's exception, his redemption, his cause. She wanted to be Celeste Moreau for herself. You once told me you wanted to know who I really am. She gave him a sad smile. So do I. A moment of silence, a war between holding on and letting go. And then Celeste turned and walked out the door. Ethan didn't stop her, because for the first time in his life he knew, if he truly loved her, he had to let her go. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Celeste and Ethan had gone their separate ways, yet neither of them had truly moved on. Not in the way that mattered. Their paths no longer crossed, but their thoughts still did. In the quiet moments, in the solitude of night, in the echoes of memories they weren't ready to let go of. Celeste's new life. For the first time in years, Celeste was rebuilding. She had found a steady job at a small independent bookstore, nothing extravagant, nothing glamorous, but it was hers. Her own work, her own income, her own life. She rented a small apartment in a quiet corner of Paris. Modest, cozy, imperfect, but entirely hers. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a ghost wandering through the city. She was real. She had a place. She had herself again. And yet, she still thought about him. She would pass by a cafe where they once sat or hear the deep timbre of a voice that reminded her of his, and for a fleeting second she would wonder, did he ever think of her too? Ethan's search for meaning. Ethan Pierce was a man who had spent his entire life chasing success, but after Celeste walked away, something inside him shifted. For the first time, he started questioning what success even meant. The business deals, the luxury, the endless cycle of hollow conversations, they all felt meaningless now. He found himself turning away from shallow relationships, walking out of social events that once defined his world. He wanted more. Something real. Something that felt like Celeste. But he didn't call her. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew she had left to find herself. And if she wasn't ready, then neither was he. An unspoken connection. They didn't see each other. They didn't call. They didn't send messages. In the quiet moments before sleep, in the spaces between conversations, in the feeling that someone was missing. Because love doesn't fade in silence. Sometimes it grows. The streets of Paris glistened under the soft glow of streetlights, raindrops painting silver reflections on the pavement. The city, alive with its usual rhythm, felt distant, as if time had slowed just for this moment. Ethan Pierce stood in the rain, drenched, his heart pounding as he stared at the apartment door in front of him. For months he had held back, given her space, let her go, allowed himself to grow. But tonight, he couldn't wait anymore, because no matter how much time passed, it was always her. Celeste. A door between them. He raised his fist and knocked, once, twice, 3 times. For a moment, nothing. Then, footsteps. A pause. The door creaked open, and there she was. Celeste Moreau stood barefoot, her hair slightly tousled, wrapped in a soft sweater, her eyes widened in shock, disbelief flickering through them as she took him in. Soaked, breathless, standing in front of her as if he had just walked through a storm. Ethan, I couldn't stop thinking about you. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but thick with emotion. Not for a single day. Celeste gripped the edge of the doorframe, trying to steady herself. She had dreamed of this moment, but she had also feared it. Why now? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan stepped closer, raindrops slipping from his hair onto his face, but he didn't care. Because I finally understand. Understand what? That it was never about fixing you. It was never about proving anything. His gaze locked onto hers. I don't care about your past, Celeste. I just care about you, here, now, as you are. A love that can't be denied. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long feeling like she had to prove her worth. Like love was something she had to deserve, to fight for. But Ethan, he was just offering it to her. No conditions, no expectations, just love. A lump formed in her throat. Ethan, I don't want to be someone you save. He shook his head and needed saving. Silence stretched between them. The city hummed. The rain fell softly. The world held its breath. Then, finally, Celeste stepped forward, took his hand, and for the first time, let herself fall arms. And just like that, the world made sense again. Paris had always been a city of love, but for Ethan and Celeste, it was now a city of second chances. This time, there were no barriers, no judgment, no expectations, no need to prove anything. Just them. 2 souls who had fought their own battles, walked through their own storms, and somehow, against all odds, found their way back to each other. A love without conditions. Ethan had spent years believing that love had to be grand, extravagant, a prize to be won. But with Celeste, he learned that love could be simple. It was late-night conversations in a small Parisian apartment, not expensive hotel suites. It was walking through the rain without umbrellas, not chauffeured cars. It was laughter over coffee in a tiny cafe, not private dining in Michelin-starred restaurants. Celeste had spent years believing that love was something she had to fight for, something she had to earn. But with Ethan, she learned that love, real love, was given freely. No one was asking her to be someone she wasn't. No one was asking her to fit into a world she didn't belong to. For the first time in her life, she was enough, just as she was. The world still talked, but they no longer listened. Why would he be with her? Doesn't she feel out of place? This won't last. The whispers never stopped, but Celeste no longer cared, and Ethan no longer heard them, because when you find something real, something that feels like home, nothing else matters. They had already won. The message: love beyond circumstances. Not wealth, not status, not past mistakes. What defines love is honesty, resilience, and the willingness to stand by each other, no matter what. Because in the end, it's not where you come from that matters. It's where you're willing to go, together. And Ethan and Celeste, they chose each other. The beginning of forever. At its core, Ethan and Celeste's story is more than just a romance. It is a testament to resilience, self-worth, and the power of love beyond circumstances. Their journey reflects lessons that resonate deeply, especially with those who have lived long enough to understand that life is rarely as simple as it seems. 1, love is not about status, it's about connection. In a world obsessed with labels, wealth, and appearances, true love has nothing to do with where you come from or what you have. Ethan and Celeste came from 2 entirely different worlds, yet what brought them together was not money or background, but the way they truly saw each other. It is a reminder that genuine relationships are built on understanding, not social expectations. 2, you cannot love someone else until you know yourself. Celeste had to walk away, not because she didn't care, but because she needed to rebuild herself first. Many times in life, people rush into relationships seeking validation, hoping love will fill the gaps within them. But love is not meant to fix us, it is meant to complement us. To truly love, we must first be whole on our own. 3, growth takes time, and so does love. Both Ethan and Celeste needed time apart to understand what they truly wanted. Sometimes love isn't about chasing, it's about waiting, learning, and coming back when both people are ready. The strongest relationships aren't the ones that happen instantly, but the ones that withstand time and trials. 4, the opinions of others should never define your happiness. Society will always have something to say, whether it's about the person you love, the choices you make, or the life you build. But real happiness comes when you stop living for others and start living for yourself. Ethan and Celeste found peace when they stopped trying to fit into the world's expectations and started choosing each other no matter what anyone else thought. Because in the end, love is about the 2 people in it, not the opinions of those watching. 5, second chances are real, but only if we're brave enough to take them. Life rarely gives us a perfect story. We lose things, we make mistakes, we walk away, but when something is truly meant for us, it finds its way back, not as it was, but as something stronger. Ethan and Celeste's love was not perfect, but it was real, raw, and worth fighting for. And the greatest lesson of all? The past may shape us, but it does not define us. It is who we choose to become that truly matters.